So what happens after a property is foreclosed? To introduce myself, my name is Troy Funk, and that's Funk, F-U-N-K, Fun K, and I have been in the real estate business going on 4 decades now, and in that time I have specialized in foreclosure sales. I've been helping owners through foreclosure. I've worked with lenders that acquire properties through foreclosure. I handle the whole process. In fact, I've actually had foreclosures on my own situation in this last downturn that we had back in '08, right, where the market just literally crashed. Where a lot of people are concerned, we're back to those days again. We're seeing the real estate market change very quickly right now. So here we go again, right? The market has changed drastically, especially in the last couple months, and we're gonna start seeing foreclosures increase greatly, or at least I believe so, and here's why. Now, pre-pandemic, we had a normal supply of foreclosures happening, but pandemic actually put a freeze on foreclosures. So it backlogged the foreclosures that normally were going to come in the system, and now those moratoriums are off, or at least in the state of Florida. So we're going to start seeing those foreclosures come in circulation. The good news is the owners that were facing foreclosure now have equity. A lot of them have equity, which wasn't the case. So timing is certainly critical if somebody is facing foreclosure on trying to sell their property. But what happens to the property? What happens after the property is foreclosed? So first off, let me talk to sellers, and then I want to talk to buyers about how different this process is. Now, if you're a seller, that means you're facing foreclosure, right? And if you are facing foreclosure, I created a separate website that talks about all the options to foreclosure and what's possible if you want to stay in your property, if you want to prolong the sale, or if you just are looking to cash out. Now, obviously in a market we've just come through where we've seen a huge appreciation in property values, a lot of owners have equity in their property, which means if they sell their property before foreclosure, they're going to walk out with money. But what happens if they wait and they say, no, let me wait for the last possible situation? And that's typically a lot of the calls we receive, is we receive calls right before the property is about to be foreclosed, sometimes even the day before. And I'll tell you, it's just too late at that point. It's often too late to save a situation. Now, of course, you could talk to an attorney and see what's possible. A lot of people file bankruptcy. They strategically prolong their time to live in a home as long as they can. But ideally, the bank's going to end up with the property in most cases. And what's very damaging to an owner is, first off, right now they have equity. And if they potentially have equity, right? And if they don't pull that out, the longer they wait, the less possibility they are to get their equity out. That's problem number one. Number two is, it's sort of unknown. You don't really know what takes place. You want the best possible situation to avoid a foreclosure. So what's the worst case scenario here if somebody says, look, I'm just gonna let the bank take the house back. I've given up, they can have the house, let them just foreclose. I'm not gonna do anything. And that happens a lot. Well, Here's the consequences of a foreclosure. So let's just start with the first thing. Now, if you're in possession of the property and the bank takes ownership of the property, or it's foreclosed at the courthouse steps, the bank, or the lender, should I say, owns your property. And that means that they want to evict you. They want you out as soon as they own that property. Now, in Florida, we have a 10-day right of redemption where the occupant has a right to redeem, pay off the mortgage, pay off the debt, and stay in the property. Now, the likelihood of that is very slim, because if you haven't been making your payments and the property's foreclosed, it's kind of hard to say, okay, I have all the money, here you go, take it away, stop the sale. But in Florida, there is a redemption period. But let's just say the owner doesn't redeem it and the property is actually foreclosed. Then what happens? Well, the bank owns the property, so their object is to resell the property. They're not looking to let the tenant stay or the former owner stay in the property. They don't work out rental agreements. We typically have not seen any of that happen. The normal protocol for a bank is when they take possession of the property, they want to sell it and they want the current occupant out of the property. So oftentimes they have two choices to make. They can do an eviction or they can do a cash for keys. Now that is the lender's option how they do that. There's no guarantees what they have to do here. So in a lot of times the lender looks out for the lender. What is in their best interest? Their best interest a lot of times is to offer cash for keys. And that's where they offer the occupant, if it's the former owner or if there's a tenant in place, they offer them a sum of money to move out and a time period. Now, if the occupant doesn't accept that offer, sometimes it's negotiable, usually it's not. I've seen where owners want to negotiate that figure and the bank says, look, we made you our best offer up front, and if you don't accept it, that the offer's off the table. So owner says, okay, great, I will take cash for keys or I won't take cash for keys. If they accept the cash for keys, bank gives them a certain amount of money, they then have to remove themselves from the property and keep it broom swept. Leave it so they're not leaving any trash behind. Just leave it in a place where the bank can go in and start to remarket that property. So let's just say cash for keys doesn't work. The owner says, no, I'm not taking your cash for keys. Then we're looking at an eviction. The bank has the right to evict the former owner from their property and take possession of the property. That's the first part of it. Now the second part is that once the bank takes possession of the property, now what happens to the former borrower? Well, of course, they have a foreclosure on their record, and that's going to be challenging if they're looking to rent another property. And it also is challenging because it puts them in a very difficult situation to be able to buy another home for an extended period of time. What's that time period? Well, you got to talk to a lender, but there's options. If that former borrower had done a short sale or sold the property, they have a certain time period in which they can borrow money again. If they let the property foreclose, that time is extended greatly, which means it's harder to financially recover having not done a short sale or sold the property as opposed to letting the bank just foreclose it and take it. So foreclosure will hurt their credit. That's number one. Another problem to the borrower is not just their credit, but what are the consequences? Let's just say that the bank files a deficiency judgment. Now, we're in the state of Florida. In the state of Florida, and I'm not giving a legal advice, I'm not an attorney, but the bank has a right to file a deficiency judgment against the borrower, which means the borrower is not off the hook. Even though they said, look, we just gave the property back to the bank, we don't want to ever deal with this again, that nightmare is not over with in that situation where the bank now can file a deficiency judgment, and then with a deficiency judgment, they can start garnishing wages, they can start garnishing income. So just letting the property foreclose doesn't mean that you're off the hook. In fact, it may give the bank the power to start garnishing and taking wages from you. So that's a financial problem with that, depending on where you're at. So, obviously these are issues you want to talk with an attorney on, but the easy answer is if you're facing foreclosure, you want to sell the property. Now, what happens to the property? Now, the bank takes possession of it. So it's now the bank's responsibility to maintain that property and put it back in shape. And the bank's going to look at it as their investment. The bank does not file a deficiency judgment. What that means is they're typically going to write that debt off. They're going to write the loss off. Well, that's how the bank deals with it, but that's problematic for the borrower because what the bank will do is they'll send the tax form saying, guess what? You now owe taxes on the money that we wrote off. That becomes a financial problem to the borrower, and that's a problem that the borrower needs to work out with their CPA. But in essence, they're going to owe tax on the money the bank writes off if the bank doesn't file a deficiency judgment. Either way, either option is not good for the borrower. So it's not a good situation to have your property foreclosed. It takes longer to recover financially. If you're looking to buy another property, it's difficult to find another residence if you're looking to rent another home because they're going to see your property is foreclosed. And the bank is either going to send you a big tax bill or they're going to come after you with a deficiency judgment here in the state of Florida. Foreclosure is not a good thing for the borrower, and it's something that a borrower, if they're facing foreclosure, should do everything they can to avoid not to have a foreclosure. Okay, so that's the problem for a borrower. What about a buyer? Buyer looking to buy a foreclosure. Okay, let's just say, okay, now you're a buyer and you're looking for a good opportunity. Are you taking advantage of owners that are in distress? Well, it is business, and I wouldn't say taking advantage of them, but you obviously as a buyer, you're looking for a good value, you're looking for a good opportunity, and you want to work with sellers that are motivated, especially in a market where we are seeing changes right now. You want to work with motivated sellers. If a seller is facing foreclosure, they're motivated, they want to sell, they typically want to negotiate. It's a good opportunity. Buying their house will help them. and will help you. It'll help you get a better value. It helps the seller get out of a financial problem. So it's an opportunity for a buyer and a seller when a buyer is looking to buy a foreclosure. The other option, they can buy it pre-foreclosure, they can buy it at the courthouse steps, which often has title problems, or they can buy it from the bank after the bank forecloses. So there's many ways a buyer can buy a foreclosure. Now, specializing in foreclosures and helping people, I do have an inventory of pre-foreclosure listings that I carry. So if you are a buyer and you are looking for a good opportunity, reach back to me and I'll put you on my VIP list of properties we're marketing that are in pre-foreclosure status, where we are dealing with motivated sellers that want to sell their properties here in the state of Florida. So again, if you're a buyer, you're looking for an opportunity on a foreclosure property, reach out. Again, if I've been helpful to you, my name is Troy Funk, and that's Funk, F-U-N-K. Please hit that like button, hit the subscribe button, and I hope to see you on my next video.